What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Fantasy playoffs are here. We got a full 16 games to go over today. So sit back, hit the like button, and let's start things off with the Thursday night game. Chargers at Raiders. Low, like a lot of games this week. 34-point total. Raiders 3-point home favorites. For the Chargers, we're going to have Easton Stick at quarterback. They have the third lowest team total of the week. Because of that, obviously moving from Justin Herbert. Only two really considering on the Chargers here are Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen. And even with the quarterback change, I would play them this week. If we look back to, and it's not, a great thing to look at, but it's the only thing we really have is who did he throw to? When he had 13 completions last week, 9 of them went to Eckler and Keenan Allen. The odds are you would think that that would happen, right? You would imagine that he would just lean on the best players. So even if the ceiling is a little bit lower for each of them than we'd expect, you would imagine that the volume would continue to flow through Austin Eckler, through Keenan Allen. I would play both of them this week. We could see Joshua Palmer return, but I have him in my 16-team league. It's actually 16 or Dynasty. Now I don't remember which one it is. But regardless, both of those formats have 2 flex spots. One of them has 3 wide receiver and 2 flex spots. And I'm still not really considering him this week. I would want to see him come back, be good, and then start him in the following week. And even then, with backup quarterback, it probably won't be going there. Then for the Raiders, Myers has definitely seen his target share fall in recent weeks. He's only grading out as a wide receiver 32 right now. This is also a winnable game for the Raiders, which does open up the risk that in the second half, if they build out a lead, this is a team that really does want to run the ball. And so if that happens, we could see them go more run heavy. That would be bad for Jacoby Myers. Speaking of the ground game, I don't yet know what the status of Josh Jacobs is. Could play, could miss. If he's out there, you're starting him. They would just feature him. If he's not out there, look for Zamir White to be worth, honestly, a spot start at running back 2. I have been asked between basically like how many touches we can really expect him to get, because they do have a third down back. The thing is, they're going to lean on Zamir. So Abdullah is a third down back, will get targets. They're not going to give Amir Abdullah like 20 touches, right? That's just not going to happen. They would give Zamir White most of the carries. And if we get into a positive game script, that'll be really good for Zamir White. He's only grading out as my running back 28 right now, but there is definitely upside for 17 or 18 touches for him in this spot. If they get ahead, just know that the floor is obviously low. So if you're like the 1 seed, you've had a great season, you've only lost a few games, you've got 2 really good running back 2s, or 2 really good running backs, so a good one at 1 and 2. You probably don't need to go to Zamir White, but maybe you went RB0, maybe you took some like quarterbacks early, tight ends early, wide receivers early, and you're like, well, I've actually kind of been struggling at running back 2 all season. He would be an okay spot start. And then Adams, just play him every week. I know the production's been down this season, but you have to play Adams every week. Next up, we've got Vikings at Bengals, 39.5-point total. Bengals, 3.5-point home favorites. For the Vikings, all depends on injuries. Jefferson said he's going to play. I don't think he would lie to us, so I think Jefferson's going to be out there. And then Madison is questionable. That one's going to have a pretty big impact on if we get a spot start from Ty Chandler. Again, everything on the website is 100% free now through the Super Bowl. And so this is a spot where there is a lot of news. I would just wait for all the news to come out and see what the projections, the updated projections do have there. Again, right now I'm assuming Jefferson is going to play. I think Madison will be out. If that happens, you're playing Jefferson, you're playing Hawkinson, they're must starts. Ty Chandler grades out as a running back 22. Addison, wide receiver 37. Neither one of them would be must starts. Again, also, we're now assuming fantasy playoffs. We're assuming you only really have the top half of teams. If you're looking at the wide receiver 37, that better be at like wide receiver 3. That better be in the second flex spot, maybe in a 14 or 16 team league, 10 team league, 2 wide receiver spots. You're not playing Addison this week. Both of them would have a ceiling, like they would have the potential to have good games, but they would have a much lower chance of hitting their ceiling this week. But yeah, spot start for Ty Chandler would still be fine. Running back 22 isn't like a really bad play. I just wouldn't bench, like if you have 2 top 15 running backs, there's just no reason to go to Ty Chandler because it is risky. Then for the Bengals, start their studs. Maybe stream Browning, kind of depends on what your other options are. Chase should be in starting lineups. Browning, he's right now the quarterback 17. I said we should start him last week. The matchup was much better last week. There's a lot more risk in the matchup this week. Minnesota does send pressure. They are a scheme that can potentially confuse Browning. That's not to say he's going to have a bad game, because he can easily have a good one. It's just that there's more risk that Browning has a bad game this week than there has been the last few weeks. So there are other options I definitely like over Browning. But again, start Chase. I think you're probably starting Mixon. Chase Brown has gotten a lot more usage recently, which is obviously hurting Joe Mixon, but the role in the red zone is incredibly strong. He's going to have receptions. He's still going to rack up a ton of carries. I still think you're playing Joe Mixon this week. Next up, Steelers at Colts, 42-point total. Colts 2.5-point home favorites. These are the 5th and the 6th teams we're going to go over in this video. So gone through 6 teams. Every single one of the teams we've talked about so far, and we'll talk about in this next game, is a backup quarterback. We are 6 for 6 in backup quarterbacks. It is incredible how many quarterback injuries we have seen this season. That has obviously played a part. It hasn't been the whole reason, but it's played a big part in why totals are so down this season. Scoring is down. We have a ton of players underperforming. It's like half the league is playing with backup quarterbacks, and this is just something that we typically don't see. There are 16 games this week. Every single team is playing. Only 5 have a total over 43.5. 8 have a total of less than 40. So really, really low scoring football expected. But anyways, Steelers at Colts, 42-point total. Colts 2.5-point home favorites. For the Steelers, the matchup is really, really good. We were streaming Browning last week against this Colts defense. He went off. Basically, everyone that plays the Colts has a really good game. Unfortunately for the Steelers, they've only had one good game this season. So even in, good matchup, it's kind of tough to trust any of them. Warren, Najee, low-end running back 2s. Deontay, Pickens are, just low-end wide receiver 3s. Pat Freiermuth, kind of a high-end tight end 2, but all can be played. You can play low-end wide receiver 3s. You can play low-end running back 2s. You can play high-end tight end 2s. None of them are amazing plays, though. So you can't really be upset if you play someone on the Steelers and they have 3 for 40, 4 for 40. That kind of is in a general range of what we should expect from some of these players. I would imagine that one of the 5 we just went over has a pretty good game. And so if you think that you can guess right, or you think you have the one that's going to go off, go for it. I don't think they're bad plays. I just don't think their plays are going to really help you advance in the playoffs. Then for the Colts, Pittman's been wide receiver 8 this week. He's been awesome. He's been one of the best wide receivers in football this season. Great role, great player. You're definitely playing him every single week. I don't care what the matchup is. Minshew is my quarterback 14 right now, so good streaming option ahead of Browning right now. And then Moss has been running back 8. That's the one people disagree with the most given his 2 duds. But the role is there. I know he's been terrible. Last 2 weeks, he's played 92% of the snaps, has 91% of the running back carries, 14% target share, 9 carries inside the 10-yard line. That is a featured role. You play anyone getting that level of volume. He has less than 15 total fantasy points to show for it. I don't know how he hasn't scored a touchdown. He had the touchdown call back last week on the blown holding call, so you can kind of blame that one there on the officials. But 9 carries inside the 10-yard line. You'd think that would translate into 1 touchdown. It hasn't yet. It's probably coming, but I do understand if you've got other options that grade out relatively similarly and you're just done with Moss, I get it, right? I don't think you have to play him, but he does grade out really well. But yeah, going back to Minshew, he's a good option this week because the wide receivers are good options. The Steelers allow a ton of big games to wide receivers, 3rd highest yards per reception to the position. And so if probably going to be Pittman, but if one of the wide receivers is going off, that's going to translate into Minshew. I think Minshew is a good option this week. Final Saturday game, so probably should have mentioned it. One Thursday game. The 2 we just went over before this have been Saturday games. I don't remember what time it's probably 1, 4, and 8 as the start times. But know that. No, don't just show up on Sunday and be why is half the league already played? So the first game we went over Thursday, next 2 were Saturday. This is the final Saturday game. Broncos at Lions, high 47.5-point total. Lions 5-point home favorites. For the Broncos, you're really only looking at their core of Russell Wilson, Courtland Sutton, and Javonte Williams. Sutton has a touchdown in 10 of 13 games this season, but only 1 game over 77 receiving yards. So it really has been the touchdowns. He's touchdown or bust all season. But like the touchdowns have been insane and they're consistent. It's not like he's scoring like 2 or 3 touchdowns some weeks and then a bunch of 0. He basically just scores a touchdown every single game and has like 60 yards to go along with it and ends up being a good play. So he's been wide receiver 23. If he scores a touchdown again, he's going to be a good play. Definitely playable as a wide receiver 2. Just know that if he doesn't score, the floor is a lot lower than it's been seeming because he just has been hitting on not even short touchdowns, on like deep touchdowns. You remove that one play in a lot of games, he's got a very low floor. Again, it just doesn't look like it when you look at the box score of, again, been scoring and has a great role in the red zone. So I probably would continue playing him at wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 ideally. Then with Javonte Williams, the Lions have a very, very strong run defense. It's kind of a scary spot. Only 3 teams limit running back rush attempts more. Only 1 team limits running back receptions more. So not very good for volume from him. He is a volume-based play, though, and that can be like, that can basically lead to variance. Like he just gets a ton of touches. So maybe even in the bad matchup, he gets a ton of touches and he kind of gets there on volume. It's scary, though. That's why the variance comes in there. The floor could be low. If he's a volume-based play and the volume goes away, well, we're not playing for the efficiency. So like if he's only going to get, 8 to 10 touches, which is probably on the low end, but is a possibility, the floor is just a lot lower this week. Fine. But like if it's between 2 players, I would probably end up benching Javonte Williams in favor of the other player. And then again, Russ is fine to stream, but he has like no ceiling. He's basically just a floor play. So if you're, a 15-point underdog, I wouldn't roll Russ out there. He's not going to win you the week. 3 straight games, at least 2 touchdowns. You're like, that's awesome. But he hasn't been a top 10 fantasy quarterback since week 4. Most of the time he hovers in that quarterback 11 to 17 range, which is fine. It's nice to know that you're not going to have a complete dud because they do throw the ball a ton when they get into the red zone. But it's also not great knowing that like he's not going to win you the week. He's not going to have a blow-up game. Then for the Lions, start everyone. Yes, the Broncos defense is improving as of late. And yes, Detroit is coming off a down game, but you start the Lions when they're playing at home. Like you just do that. You find success over time in doing that. Even with the improvements as well for this Denver defense, like they're still the number 1 matchup running back. So even though like over the last few weeks, honestly over the last like maybe month and a half, 2 months, they've been improving. They still grade out trailing 10 weeks as the number 1 matchup for running backs and is a strong matchup for tight ends. I would start all of Monty, of Gibbs, of St. Brown, Sam Laporta. I get all of them in starting lineups. And I would stream Goff. Goff is just great in a dome. He's great at home. Like he scores 19.8 points per game at home, 14.7 points per game on the road this season. So he's gone from a high-end quarterback 1 at home to a low-end quarterback 2 on the road. Games at home, I would play him. 1 o'clock games on Sunday. Kick off with Bucs at Packers. 41.5 point total. Packers 3.5 point home favorites. For the Bucs, the Packers are a plus matchup for running backs, but a poor one for wide receivers, close to neutral for tight ends, though it kind of depends on how you look at it for tight ends. Evans is coming off a dud last week, but I would consider him and Rachaad White must starts. Like ceiling is hard to come by this season. We've got so many backup quarterbacks. We've got a lot of, defensive scheme changes that are just limiting big plays. And so we haven't had as many spike performances. When you've got a player like Mike Evans who could score, 40 fantasy points, he could go 175 yards, multiple touchdowns. You got to play him. You got to play him and live with the weeks when he scores 1 because he can single-handedly win you the week. I don't see a world where rest of season, no matter how he does the next few weeks, I don't see how you bench Mike Evans at all. So I'd start him. And then I would start Rachaad White. His role has been fantastic. And then Godwin, coming off 11 targets, so you'd think, okay, maybe we're liking him this week, continues to be really inefficient. Only caught 5 of the 11 targets with 53 scoreless yards. He just hasn't put it together. I don't really want to start him until he does. So wide receiver 39 this week. I think the targets will be there, but he's been really inefficient this season. I leave him on benches. And then Otten kind of bailed out by a touchdown late last week. He'll need a touchdown this week, but tight end 14. So if tight end 14 is your best option, I suppose he's fine. Nothing about the play stands out. Then for the Packers, not a ton to like, even if Christian Watson is going to miss this game. Again, Reed's the top option. Romeo Doubs is fine. But they're really just flex plays, more ideally wide receiver 3s. Dillon also fine at running back 2 if Aaron Jones is going to miss again. But, even in a plus matchup for wide receivers, no one on this team really stands out because, they have a lot of good players and it's not that amazing of an offense. And so you take, relatively little production. We always talk about the pie. It's kind of a small pie for the Packers. Chopping it up amongst a bunch of different players, everyone just gets a small piece. Someone's probably going to have a good game, but I don't know. Fantasy playoffs, I have Jaden Reed. I am playing Jaden Reed, but it's in my second flex spot. So in both Dynasty and in my 16-team league, I have him. Second flex spot. I think that sort of thing, full PPR in both of them, I think that is fine. If you're in like half PPR, 12-team leagues, wide receiver 2, that's not fine. I would definitely want a better option than that. Next up, we've got Falcons at Panthers, low, 35-point total. Falcons, 3-point road favorites. For the Falcons, this is an elite matchup for running backs, poor one for wide receivers, and for tight ends. That plays right into how the Falcons want to run their offense, and so you have to think we're going to see heavy volume from the combination of Bijan and Algier this week. Drake London went off last week in a great spot, but the matchup is basically the opposite this week. It leans towards running backs, not wide receivers, and so he's only grading out as a flex play after being a good play last week. You can still use him, and just because he's not as good of a play last week, just because the matchup is poor, doesn't mean that he's not like one of the most featured wide receivers in the NFL, one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. Like, if there was actual volume flowing through wide receivers on this offense, he'd be incredible. And so if they run into a game where we see elevated targets, all the wide receiver targets are going to Drake London. And so that's when he has the ceiling like last week. And that can still happen even in a spot that tilts you towards the run, because what if the Panthers, who are barely underdogs this week, what if they pull ahead and they force the Falcons to be a little bit more pass heavy? He can still have a good game. So I'm totally fine playing Drake London. If you believe in the talent, you believe in the spot, you want to play him, that's fine. Just him plus Pitts. They both have just a little bit of a lower ceiling, or a little bit of a lower chance of hitting their ceiling, and a lower floor this week, and a better chance of hitting that floor. And the matchup is really bad for Pitts. Only 2 teams limit tight end targets more than the Panthers. They've allowed a below average catch rate and yards per reception as well to tight ends. It's not a good spot for tight ends. Pitts should probably stay on benches, but I get it if you have to go there. Then for the Panthers, the Falcons are a bad matchup for wide receivers, decent one for tight ends, neutral one for running backs. Thielen and Chuba Hubbard are really the only 2 you're probably looking at on this team, and neither one of them grades out super well this week. Chuba does have 25 opportunities in back-to-back games, so he's getting the ball a lot. You can definitely play him as a volume-based running back too. The tough part is that he only has 2 total targets over the last 2 weeks, so most of that volume is being fed to him on the ground. That's going to hurt his floor and ceiling. The ceiling is only so high. If even at 25 touches, if all of them are carries, you can only do really so well, especially in not an amazing spot. And then for the floor, well, if you don't score, you don't have any catches and no touchdowns, you can only score so many fantasy points. So not a good spot for him, but fine if you have to play him. Again, just like a volume-based low-end running back too. And then Thielen is fine in the flex, more ideally at wide receiver 3. I wish we could look to Mingo because the targets are there, but he's been so inefficient. He has 1 billion targets with no touchdowns this season. It's you basically, if you're playing Mingo, you're hoping for 6 for 60. And if you're hoping for 6 for 60, it's probably not someone you want to play. Next up, we've got the Giants at the Saints, low 37.5-point total. Saints, 5-point home favorites. For the Giants, start Saquon, bench everyone else. For the Saints, the Giants are a plus matchup for running backs and wide receivers, -1 for tight ends. There are injury situations to keep an eye on, but for the most part, the Saints are fairly straightforward, no matter how these injury situations unfold this week. Kamara, no matter what, is a weekly must start. Olave is close to it. Olave's ceiling is obviously elevated for every player that's out. If you lose Taysom Hill, you lose Rashid Shaheed, you already have Michael Thomas out. It's everyone that you remove from the offense, it elevates the ceiling and the chance of hitting the ceiling for Olave. But I think regardless, even if Hill came back, if Shaheed came back, I think you're still playing Olave. And then if we ever get Jameis Winston starting, you're just jamming Olave into your starting lineup. But yeah, I think it's mostly Kamara and Olave from this team, and I would play both of them. Next up, we've got Texans at the Titans, low 38-point total. Titans, 2.5-point home favorites. Fresh off an upset win over the Dolphins. Texans side, depends on the injuries. With a lot of situations this week, that's why, again, check the rankings later in the week, completely free on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Check that as injury news updates. But who knows? We could have Stroud, Schultz, and Nico all out, joining Tank Dell, who's also out, which would be their entire starting lineup. but we could also have, Strout, Schultz, and Nico all playing. Like, there's a lot of different scenarios here, and so we kind of just have to wait and see for this team. The Titans are a really good matchup for wide receivers, though, and, it would just be Nico. I mean, like, they have Noah Brown, they have some of these, like, really young players that they do want to get involved, but, like, if we get Strout and Nico starting against the Titans, like, that's a smash spot for Nico Collins. I don't think I would play Stroud regardless. Like, I don't know. Like, it'd be kind of risky to play him, especially if Nico's out. He just doesn't have enough weapons to really be a confident start for me. But, again, we kind of just have to see who's playing and go from there. But yeah, I would say, like, if we get Nico out, I don't really want to look to any of the secondary wide receivers. Maybe Noah Brown, but it's the fantasy playoffs. So you got to have a better option than Noah Brown this week. So it's probably just Nico if he plays. But yeah, we just kind of have to wait for all the injuries there. And I don't think I would play any of the running backs. Then for the Titans, Derrick Henry is a home favorite. Whenever Derrick Henry is a home favorite, he needs to be in your starting lineup. This is also a team in the Texans that have allowed the second highest opponent rushing touchdown percentage against them when teams score. It's on the ground against the Texans. This is a potential eruption spot for Derrick Henry. Should absolutely be in starting lineups. Aside from him, you can look at Hopkins definitely again as like probably honestly a high-end wide receiver too. 12 targets in back-to-back weeks. No team is allowed a higher yards per reception over expected to wide receivers than the Texans. I would definitely play Henry and Hopkins this week. Bears at Browns is up next. Another low, 37.5 point total. Browns, 3.5 point home favorites. For the Bears, Cleveland is a poor matchup all around, and the Bears are also, road underdogs in a low total game. So you've got a tough matchup. You've got a low scoring game. You're on the road. You got to stick to just the studs in spots like these. Fields, Moore, Kmet, all quality options this week. I would avoid the running backs because I don't trust the volume on their end. One thing I'll note is horrible matchup for Cole Kmet, but Evan Ingram just went off last week against the same Browns defense, and that was the first really big game they've given up to a tight end. So is it possible? Yes, but even counting that game, it is still the worst matchup for tight ends, and so don't love the spot for Cole Kmet. He can produce, but it's not an amazing spot. For the most part, I'd probably stick to Fields and DJ Moore. Then for the Browns, the Bears are actually a really tough matchup for running backs on the ground, but they're a great matchup for running back receptions. And so if we can get that to play out, that can kind of save the running backs for the Browns. Overall, though, Chicago grades out as a negative matchup for all positions, and specifically, they limit yards per reception to wide receivers and tight ends more than any other team. So we're not expecting a lot of efficiency here from the Browns. I would say all of Jerome Ford, Amari Cooper, David Njoku are playable this week, but Ford's only running back 3, like a running back 3, not my one running back 3. Amari Cooper's a flex play, and just a fine one, not an amazing one. And then David Njoku is actually my tight end 7. He's a strong play. Like he's just good. The touchdowns are finally coming for him. We know that the role has been strong in the red zone. We don't know who's going to score 2 touchdowns every week, but tight end's kind of a wasteland. I would honestly play David Njoku. No one else really stands out, to be honest, on the Browns. Next up, we've got the only potential weather game. So I went over weather early last week. There's only one spot this week, and it's this Jets at Dolphins game, and it's wind. So we could see really heavy winds. But again, I record these on Wednesday. We don't know yet. So check back. I put a link in the Discord. Maybe I'll try and remember to put it in the description box of this one. Just go to like Roto Grinders weather. You can probably find it. Go to rotogrinders.com, go to their weather section. That's the best spot to understand what the best and I guess the worst weather spots are. But yeah, Jets at Dolphins, low 38.5 point total. Dolphins 8.5 point home favorites. Potential win concerns, but we'll see come Sunday. For the Jets, as with every week, it's just Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. You can play them both as running back and wide receiver 2s, respectively, and I would play them this week. Then for the Dolphins, brutal matchup against the Jets. They're obviously coming off a down game, but then it's like you say down game, right? Because they are. It's a down game for them. They scored 27. So even in a down game, they're scoring 27 points. One of the touchdowns was defensive, which kind of adds on to why it seems like it was a really bad game. Plus Tyreek Hill gets injured, and so we don't have the eruption spot from him. But regardless, if Hill plays, play him. I know it's risky playing someone who's got an injured ankle, but like if he plays, you have to play him. I would play Waddle in the flex regardless, but if Hill were to be out, which I don't think he will be, but if he were to be out this week, you're definitely playing Jalen Waddle. And then Mostert, A-Chain. I think you're playing both of them as like really quality running back twos. Definitely Mostert, because even if they're splitting the workload, he seems to be getting a lot more work in the red zone. That could obviously change, right? Any given week, they could be like, you know what, let's give A-Chain, 2-3 touchdowns this week. But honestly, just like I would still play all these players for the Dolphins, just knowing that like the Jets are a great defense and their chance of hitting their ceiling are lower. I will say though, Tua's probably a bench for me this week. Quarterbacks don't really play well against the Jets, and even with Hill and Waddle having over 100 yards each in their matchup a few weeks ago, Tua still didn't have that great of a game. He's my quarterback 15 this week. Definitely not an auto start, but I guess if that's your best option, that's fine. Final 1 o'clock game is going to be Chiefs at Patriots. Yet another low total game, 37 points. Chiefs 9.5 point road favorites. For the Chiefs, New England is a neutral to negative matchup all around, but is the toughest team to run on. I wouldn't expect Kansas City to go into New England this week and just pop off, score 40 points. Stranger things have happened, but I wouldn't expect that to occur. I wouldn't use that as a reason to like shy away from their studs, but I'd use it as a reason to say like we're not looking at like secondary options, even as 9.5 point road favorites, indicating you're a much, much better team than your opponent. I do also have some volume concerns. If the Patriots can find success, they're probably going to play slow. They're going to run the ball a ton. That could limit production for Kansas City simply because they run fewer plays. They could also sell out to stop Travis Kelce. Will they be successful? Probably not, but they'll sell out to stop him. And so could that impact Patrick Mahomes? Like there is some negative to this matchup, but overall, you're not benching Kelce. You're not benching Mahomes. Keep starting them. Rashee Rice has a few great games in a row. Honestly, I would just play him as a wide receiver flex option just for the rest of the season. He's finally getting the run that he deserves. He's a great player. He's going to produce when he gets that run. Does grade out slightly worse than previous weeks, but grading out slightly worse as like high-end wide receiver 3. For the running backs, we're going to have to wait and see on Pacheco. Play Pacheco if he's active, but if Pacheco's inactive, I don't have a ton of interest in Clyde or in McKinnon. They weren't that great plays last week. They didn't do that well. Like if they're going to split the workload, giving a little bit more to Clyde, but then McKinnon getting more in the red zone in like the worst matchup for running back rushing success, it's like, it's not a great spot. You'll need a touchdown. Even then, McKinnon scored last week, still wasn't that great of a play. Then for the Patriots, Chiefs have an elite defense. Patriots stink. So Zeke is really the only one you want to start. I would play him this week at like running back 2. You probably don't have to play him running back 1. You probably have someone else that's better, but I would play him in your running back 2 spot. Going to be very inefficient. If he doesn't score a touchdown, he won't be an amazing play, but he's going to get all the touches he can handle, all the snaps he can handle, and if they ever get close, it's going to him. So yeah, I can't promise a game like he had last week, but I play him. 4 o'clock games kick off with Commanders at Rams, high 49 point total. Rams 6.5 point home favorites. For the Commanders, this is a good spot for the passing attack, but a poor one for the running backs. We don't yet know the status of Brian Robinson, but if he's out, Gibson will be like a low-end running back to Chris Rodriguez, a potential play in like the second flex spot in deeper formats. It's a spot, though, where we just kind of have to wait and see. I haven't seen anything in regards to Brian Robinson yet, and then I'll just adjust the rankings accordingly. But yeah, great spot for the wide receivers and tight ends. You would imagine, especially if Brian Robinson is going to be out this week, that we would see heavy passing volume from Sam Howell. He's a good streaming option as my quarterback 12 right now. And the game does have shootout potential. It's one of the higher total games of the week. The Commanders offense has gotten into many shootouts in the past, and we know that the Rams side can definitely lean pass heavy, and they'll probably find success in the spot. So potential back and forth here. If it's really close between like, McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel, and the other options you have, I might lean towards the guys in this game because it could be a really good game. My guess is, though, that it's only McLaurin. Like the odds are you're not close to starting Samuel or Dotson, but if you are, they are honestly not bad plays this week. Then for the Rams, amazing spot for this Rams offense overall. Kyron's been one of the most featured running backs in the NFL. Definitely play him. But you're starting Kyron, you're starting Kupp, you're starting Puka, and you're starting Matthew Stafford this week. If you have him, he is the best streaming option. Next up, we've got 49ers at Cardinals, another high 48 point total. 49ers 13.5 point road favorites. For the 49ers, start their studs every week. Purdy actually grades out as a high-end quarterback 1 this week. I would continue using him. So we're starting Purdy, McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle. I don't really care who you have. Just start all those 5. Then for the Cardinals side, San Fran is a tough matchup, and Arizona isn't like the best team in the league. So I'd start Trey McBride every week, mid-range tight end 1, maybe start James Conner if you have to as a low-end running back too. But ideally, for the entire Cardinals offense, it's McBride or bust. If you had to play Kyler, sure. But again, ideally, it is McBride or bust. Final 4 o'clock game is going to be probably the best game of the week. Cowboys at Bills, 50.5-point total. Bills, 2.5-point home favorites. For the Cowboys, playing at Buffalo is tough. It's just a very difficult environment to plan, and we do know that Dallas plays significantly better at home, but I just think, even in a tough spot, even knowing that Dallas plays worse on the road, and we'll probably have a worse game than we've seen recently from them this week. You got to play Dak. You got to play Lamb. And I think you have to play Pollard. Like, Pollard's the biggest question mark, but he's got 19, 23, and 23 opportunities over the last 3 weeks. He has a touchdown in 3 of the last 4. He's my running back 10 this week. I would start him. Behind those 3, Ferguson's fine. Tight end 10. Nothing stands out about him this week. Brandon Cooks, fine as a low-end, like, second flex play, but Brandon Cooks is someone you want in their home matchups. I don't really know on the road against a good defense. I'd stream Brandon Cooks this week. Then for the Bills side, we're starting Allen, Diggs, James Cook. Cook has really seen his role expand in recent weeks. Definitely been a lot more involved in the receiving game recently. The matchup is pretty bad for him. Like, obviously, Dallas is not an offense you want to attack with running backs, but he's got 21, 23, and 15 opportunities over the last 3 weeks. He's gained at least 100 yards in all 3. I think you're playing James Cook rest of season. Biggest question mark, I think, is with Kincaid. With Knox back, only really a low-end tight end one for me. Definitely could go out there and have like 3 for 30, 4 for 40, but so could most tight ends. So if you wanted, to attack this game, because it could be a very high-scoring game, you think that maybe Dallas gets up, forces Buffalo at home to go pass heavy, it's still a good spot for Dawson Knox in that respect, but nothing stands out matchup-wise. Sunday night game is going to be Ravens at Jaguars, 43.5-point total. Ravens, 3.5-point road favorites. For the Ravens, the Jaguars are a bad matchup for running backs on the ground, but a great one for running back receptions, for wide receiver targets, and for tight end yards per reception. Baltimore can definitely take advantage of all of these matchups here, especially if they lean pass heavy, which they did last week, even in poor weather. So even in a poor weather spot, they looked at it and they said, if we throw the ball, we're going to find a lot of success. And then they did it. I'd imagine they probably do the same thing this week. So I don't think I'd play either one of the running backs in the spot, but I would definitely start Lamar Jackson. I think Isaiah Likely is a good streaming option this week. Zay Flowers is my wide receiver 25. So probably just sticking to those 3. I think all 3 really good plays, but if you're in a deeper format and you have to go to Odell, he's looked good, honestly, recently. The role seems to be expanding, so you could go there, but it better be in a more deeper format. Then for the Jaguars side, Evan Ingram has been going off recently and actually has the best matchup on the team among all their skill players. And so, in my opinion, he's a must start along with Travis Etienne. Etienne is 8th in expected points per game over the last month. So while he's been extremely inefficient, the role remains incredibly strong, especially in the red zone. I would keep playing him. Toughest calls in this team are with Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley. I would be fine with no matter what you want to do. And for the most part, that means I wouldn't be scared to bench them this week. Baltimore is a really tough matchup for quarterbacks and wide receivers. I don't have a ton of faith in either one of them having a really good game, but if you had to play Lawrence or you're like, Nick, my option behind Ridley is not very good, I wouldn't feel bad either way. I wouldn't feel bad playing them or benching them. I would honestly just check the rankings. Final game of the week is going to be Monday Night Football. Eagles at Seahawks, really good game there. 47.5-point total. Eagles, 4-point road favorites. For the Eagles, DeAndre Swift has seen his usage drop a lot recently, but it's a good matchup. He does still grade out as my running back 16, but if you don't trust it anymore and you do have other options, like let's say I'd probably still play Swift. But let's say we have Madison out and we have Jacobs out and you've got Zamir and you've got Ty Chandler as spot starts and you really wanted to play one of them over DeAndre Swift, I would be fine with it. I'm probably still going to project DeAndre Swift higher and I probably would still play DeAndre Swift, but that's the general range we're looking at as far as like if you've got one of these other players that like is potentially in a way better spot than they have been in the past and you'll want to bench DeAndre Swift, I think it's fine to do so. Here's my thing though. Probably would still play him. Seattle's allowed the 3rd most yards per carry over expected to running backs. They're a plus matchup for receptions to position as well. Really good offense. Going to get the goal line work stolen from him by Jalen Hurts, but still, I think I would still play him. Behind him, all of Hurts, Brown, Smith, and Goddard are must starts for me. This is a game that could definitely pop off. Every single one I just listed there has a week winning ceiling. Then for the Seahawks, a lot honestly depends on Geno, if he is starting or not. If he does start, Metcalf, Lockett, really strong plays, while JSN would be more of like a low-end flex play, maybe a second flex play more ideally. If we get Lock starting, I think Metcalf is still a strong play. Like, I'd probably still play Metcalf, but I'd probably bench the other two. It's a really bad matchup for running backs as well, and they continue to split the workload. So my lean is saying if you've got Ken Walker and you don't have another great option, probably play him and bench Charbonnet. But honestly, like, again, it's tough because if they're going to split in a bad matchup and we're not expecting a ton of touches to the Seattle running backs, both have a very, very low floor this week. I would be fine benching either one of them. So remember, my website is 100% free from now through the Super Bowl. Check the rankings as we get injury news, check the detailed projections. And if you're not playing this week and you for some reason watch this entire video to the end, we've got other content, the DFS content, the Dynasty content. So again, check it out, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Good luck to everyone this weekend. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here. Thanks for watching.